Great, thank you very much, and welcome to Personnel Board, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your patience with the rearrangements that we have had to make, and it's great that we are now meeting. So can I ask if there are any apologies this evening?
Stuart Munro.
Stuart Munro, and everybody else is present. The minutes of the previous meeting, are there any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? No? Okay. So are we all happy to accept those minutes? Yeah. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Public question time. We have a period of 30 minutes for members of the public to ask questions submitted under notice. Have we had any questions? No, there are no questions. Okay, do we have any member questions? No member questions. This is really good. Yeah. So the next item on the agenda is the revised grievance policy. As an HR manager myself in my day job, the grievance policy is very close to my heart. It's the way that an organisation makes sure that any problems and concerns are dealt with at the earliest possible stage and resolved quickly, and that they don't grow into something bigger, which could be a threat to the organisation. So I'm going to ask Louise to introduce this.
Good evening, everybody. So this is the new grievance policy. Just to confirm the process that this has been through. So there were some concerns with the existing and current policy, and obviously we wanted to address some of those issues. So lack of clarity around expectations, not good timeframes. So it's making sure all of those things have been built into the new policy. There's also been consultation on this policy, making sure that the union is aware of the policy and staff networks, and then also with management teams as well. So to ensure that when we introduce the policy that they all had the chance to obviously feed into it. So following on from that, we then looked to make some improvements, and that is they are highlighted in the report on page 8. But some of the areas just to sort of highlight, we're looking for early resolution where possible. So making sure that we've got informal processes in rather than jumping straight into a formal process. Clear timeframes with regard to what's needed. So again, to try and prevent grievances going on for long periods of time. Also, there's a new process flow at the back of the process of the report as well, which just sets out what you need to do at each stage. And then just sort of clarity around who's doing what and where people can get support. Now, some managers have a lot of experience of undertaking grievances, so only need a light touch with regard to what is required. But those that haven't done it, they need to know that HR is there to support them and ensure that we've got a good process in place. So the policy is in front of you with regard to the different areas. So I'm very happy to take questions if you have any questions about any of the information in there, and I will answer that as best I possibly can.
Helier Simons
Actually, it's not a question, it's a comment really. It was interesting to see that the number of grievances have risen and that had resulted in complaints about the procedure. So it's good that that was picked up, and I'm really pleased that you consulted with the staff about the things that were really wrong for them, and interestingly, the time that it takes to resolve the different things. And that's picked up, I'm looking at page 8, it's picked up later on in the bullet points on that page, that it has to have an outcome within 5 working days. That sounds very reasonable to me. What I'm particularly pleased about, and looking still at that same list of bullet points on page 8, is number 3, to focus on early resolution at the informal stage. I think that, when people are heated up and cross about something, just a simple discussion so that both sides see each other's point of view can sometimes resolve it and all is friendly again. And the 6 6th bullet point down, current policy states that bullying and harassment complaints go straight to investigation. And again, the policy is recommending an initial meeting to resolve it informally. And I think that's a real strength, a real move forward. So thank you for putting that in.
Super, thank you. Pauline Jorgensen.
Thanks. Looks generally pretty good policy. There's a couple of questions. The sort of grievance policies that I've seen in the past have got an expectation of how long the investigation's likely to take as a guidance, and I didn't see whether, you know, how long the case to answer process is expected to take. I mean, I know you can't guarantee it because it depends what the investigation is. I just wondered if that was anywhere in here.
It's not actually in the policy. As I say, my aim with the HR team would be about setting those parameters very early on. Sometimes, depending on the complexity of maybe a grievance, that will obviously affect the timings. But the fact that we're talking about sort of 5 working days, I mean, to me, where I've come from, 21 days is often a period of time that is used, which I feel is sort of reasonable, because obviously you have a number of meetings that you need to set up, and again, making sure that there's a fair process in there. So that would be what I would generally be looking to work towards. But obviously, again, it's making sure there's those clear parameters whenever any issue comes up.
So that 5 working days covers the sort of, is there a case to answer investigation? That's really quite racy, I think.
It is, and again, I think though sometimes you need to move quite quickly with some of those things.
Great aspiration, but
yeah, I mean, I appreciate when we write to people, we would always make sure that we're quite clear that it may take longer than that, because again, we don't want to set the wrong expectations. That's not the point here. I think from a management point of view, though, it's just making sure that I don't want staff feeling that they haven't been treated fairly. That's the last thing I want to happen. So it's just making sure there's good timeframes in there.
yeah, okay, yeah, and sorry, go on. The hearing manager, how do you select them?
Again, it depends on the grievance. It depends on maybe the complexity, who that person is and where they actually are within the organisation. They should be independent, obviously, of the situation, so that, again, all the way through, fairness and transparency is always coming through with regards to that. So again, and also experience. I think that's really important. Again, it's making sure that anyone we're asking to do something like that has been trained appropriately as well. So there are a number of factors that we would be looking to take into consideration. Obviously, in that informal stage, again, that can be, again, a very useful scenario for anyone new who hasn't done this type of process before, to get them involved at that very early stage. And
the third question was, I was surprised to see you could raise a grievance for a certain amount of weeks after you'd left, which was, I thought, a bit strange. I think I saw that anyway. It's 4 weeks, right?
That's
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I question that one as well. Obviously, HR is not my specialism when this report was being drafted, but I did check it with the HR consultant and legal, and they said that is part of the policy within for local government where people can raise.
Very strange, because it really limits what you can do once somebody's left. So if you have a grievance against somebody and you've already left, there's very little you can do once you've left to actually fix the problem. So I was quite surprised about that. You can take legal action, obviously, but I was surprised about that.
I can just give my understanding of the situation, and that is legally, for the past few years, it has been a requirement that we do hear a grievance after somebody has left. You can absolutely have a streamlined process, but it's also very useful as an HR person, if you've had somebody who's left the organisation and they weren't happy at the time that they left, and they do raise the issue with you, it does give you a chance to to get a better understanding of the issues that they have raised and to at the very least respond to them. There can also be times that you can resolve things after a person has left. In extreme and rare cases, for example, you might offer somebody their job back. That's a pretty rare and unusual circumstance, clearly, but it is a very valuable tool for getting things resolved.
Okay. I was surprised that was on that.
Okay.
I couldn't really think of what you could do to fix any problems, generally.
Mm.
And the final question is, I've been involved in one hearing in the council. How does that fit in with the process as a councillor? I don't know whether it was a grievance or not, actually, to be honest. Yeah, and this doesn't seem to be in here at all.
Do you want to?
Yeah, so that would normally be with statutory officers.
Yeah.
And this is not for that is separate to that process is separate. Again, I'm used to having quite a separate policy and have written one myself with regards to ensuring that that's following the right code with their terms and conditions. Because again, there's certain things you need to do due to the role that they are undertaking. And some of that is also referenced in the Constitution. So again, that would be how it would be covered.
Thank you.
Super. I think I have Prue and then I have Stephen.
So on that point, there are certain senior officers who councillors get to sit on grievance panels, because I've done that. So I want to talk about. I'm not disagreeing with what's in here. I suppose want to set my own expectations that luckily we don't have an awful lot of grievances that surface in this council, but I have had to deal with the equivalent in my role in the Liberal Democrats and a horrendous experience. I am dubious about the effectiveness of bullying and harassment being tried to be dealt with by in informal means, because what we often find is the person who is being bullied does not wish to speak outside a formal process. They feel they've got a protection if there's a formal process around them, whereas if it's tried to be sorted out between two individuals, they feel the powerlessness of that and they don't get the full story out of it. So I think we probably, HR will be used to that kind of idea.
Absolutely.
So I don't think you should imagine that everything can be resolved. It needs to be done fairly and transparently, and I was very happy to hear those words coming out of your mouth. So we need to protect people who are bullied and harassed, because they won't always speak up. They won't always feel they're in the space where they can. And so we'd have to build that process around them to make sure they feel protected.
Now that's one that I actually raised with Louise at the time that we were reviewing that, and you gave me a very good answer. Do you want to respond on that?
Well, again, hopefully it's the same answer that I gave you before. No, I mean, genuinely, with bullying and harassment, it's obviously reviewing the facts as you obviously find them. Obviously, they can differ so greatly, and often what you've got to do is it's strong management, or is it bullying and harassment, and you just need to make sure that you are I suppose looking at those facts and then assessing as required. And I am absolutely I can absolutely confirm back to you, I'm not looking to say that this isn't a bullying and harassment case. It's very much, if that is the case, then we need to deal with it, and we need to then give the protection to those staff to be able to handle it. I've come from an authority where I'm afraid I have had to recently let people go through this sort of process. So be rest assured that that will be the sort of action that I would also be looking to take in this council. I hope, Rachel, I've answered as you would expect, but if I've left anything out, sorry, Chair, I should say, apologies. Apologies, Councillor. Please just, I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I think that I think that's a very good answer. I think the other thing that I would mention is that the personnel department has been very careful to work in line with the ACAS code, because it is strongly advised that you do follow the ACAS code. And actually, if you don't follow the ACAS code, then that is something that can be held against you if, in the worst possible case scenario, it ends up going to a tribunal. And so part of the decision making was that we should look to resolve things informally wherever possible in order to ensure that we were complying with the ACAS code. Super. And Stephen, I think you had your hand up.
I did indeed. Thank you very much. And thank you for the report, Louise, and for the work that's gone into it. Just a very small footnote before I say what I was planning to say to the discussion earlier on about grievance procedures when somebody's already left the council. I think that there's a distinction between the person who is being complained against and the person who's complaining. The person who's complained against, because they've left the council, you have obviously absolutely no jurisdiction over them. But the person who is complaining, who has left the council, and that is sometimes the case. It's, I would think, much more often the case. The person feels they've been obliged to leave, and then they want to register a complaint. Then you can deal with it, I think, perfectly well. If that person is willing to engage with you, then I think there is a reasonable chance of trying to resolve the issue satisfactorily. I just wanted to ask two quick questions, if I may. One, very simple and straightforward, and that's the comments made in the summary about feedback having been received from the unions and employee focus groups. And that's obviously informed the final version. Have they seen the final version and they're happy with it?
Yes, absolutely.
Splendid. And then the final question, and forgive me if I've kind of missed something in the detail that I should have picked up, but clearly there could be grievances raised by employees against other employees, but there can be grievances raised by employees against councillors. Is this procedure something you'd envisage employing in that case, or is that something simply referred directly to the Standards Board?
My understanding is that we would need to look at that from a standards perspective and go through the monitoring officer for anything like that. But the principles should always still be the same, fair, transparent, and again, everyone given the notice, etc., that's required.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
So just, sorry, Stephen, just saying that, then should that be in the scope somewhere?
Oh, it's
Sorry, it was just a question for Stephen, actually. I was just wondering if that should then be in the scope about councils, because it doesn't say one way or another whether it applies to councils.
that's all.
I think you probably should change that.
That's kind of assuming.
To be clear, yeah, okay.
Maybe add that.
That's pretty tough.
So, Stephen, it's a public meeting and therefore there could be people
I know.
watching it, and therefore we do have to be heard and audible. Till we've done the next bit anyway, when we go into part 2.
Okay, I'm just I'm going to ask for your for you to excuse me while I just make a very quick check with Louise on a process issue, and then I can give you a full answer. Thanks. Thank you very much for your patience. I just wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing. So I think you've raised a very valuable point there, and I just conferred. I just conferred with Louise about the best way forward, because we are very keen that we have a fully robust grievance policy for the organisation as soon as possible. I think it makes some really important clarifications, and we would like to have that adopted as soon as possible. What we do is Louise can take away an action to revise the scope as needed. So we can, if councillors wish to do so, accept this policy this evening, and with the proviso that Louise will be adding in that clarification.
That sounds a perfect way forward to me.
Super, thank you. Have we got any more questions?
Just one. I was waiting to see if anybody else asked it. So we're removing the right for agency workers to raise a grievance using the working and borough council process. But what is in place? So we know that somebody has raised a grievance with their agency.
So again, we need to have a clear policy around agency workers, and you're absolutely right. They still have the right to raise that grievance, and then they would come through that agency to HR and raise that. So it wouldn't. It's not that they can't raise it. It's just they have to go through their sort of employer, because we don't actually sort of employ them. So it's not about treating them unfavourably, because again, they could still have a grievance and they could still have an issue, but it's not that it's our employees that would use this policy. But again, as I stated before, we would use exactly the same principles again once that came back. And again, I will have a look at this and as a piece of work, that ensuring that our agency policy is correct and up to date, so that the two things are talking to each other.
I think that they should have to advise us that there has been a complaint within a certain number of days.
Yes, and I again will make sure that that's within our agency report, because again, that would be something that they would be subject to.
So that would be in our contract with the agency.
Yeah.
Pauline.
For choice over microphones. That brings another question to me. The scope section isn't clear to me whether it's talking about the scope of people making complaints or the scope of people being complained against. I think it might be useful just to clarify that, because I think, although, well, I don't know whether the chief executive could make a complaint through this process, and I don't know whether they could be complained against through this process, for example. So I just think we need to clarify that a little bit whilst you're looking at the scope thing. No, it doesn't. Well, it's not clear, because yes, they can't complain using it, or they can't complain. So what happened if the chief executive wanted to raise a complaint about an employee?
Again, what I would suggest is that I will update the scope on this, and what I will do is it's making reference back to this statutory officer grievance process. So I think again, just within that scope, I'm going to look at all of these areas that you've raised. They're all very good points, and just make sure there's absolute clarity, so that, as you say, if someone picked this policy up, they know where they need to go to if it's not covered. So yeah, I will absolutely take that on board.
Yeah, I think there's two roles. There's a complainant and there's the person who's being complained against. I just think we need to be completely crystal clear about who can complain using this whole policy and who can be complained about using this policy.
I think that's a really valuable clarification, Pauline, and that's a very good way of putting it. So yes, let's make those changes. I was also going to just make a comment about the agency staff issue as well. The clarification about the agency staff that Clive was referring to, was actually one of the major points I was very pleased to see that we were updating. You can, as an employer, put yourself into a lot of difficulty if you hear a complaint made by an agency person under the employee grievance procedure, because the agency person may then claim that they were in fact an employee. So I think that was one of the very valuable changes which Louise and her team are making to this policy.
Put that very openly.
Super.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? No? Okay. So the officers will have to let me know if I am phrasing this wrongly at all. But I think I would like to ask councillors to vote on whether they wish to accept the adoption of this grievance policy, subject to the two changes that we have agreed that Louise will take away and make to the scope of the policy, so that we can clarify who can raise an issue under this policy and whose behaviour might be the subject of a complaint under this policy. Have I stated that correctly? Thank you very much. Okay, so who would be in favour of adopting this revised grievance policy? Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. Super.
Yeah, but may I ask, before we go on, how are we going to make sure that the staff know about this policy now that we've passed it? How are we going to make sure they all know about it? Because it's all very well having a piece of paper, but nobody reads bits of paper, they're too busy.
So just to confirm, there'll be a number of ways that we do this. So yes, it will be done in an email format, but it will also be done at different meetings as well, so that is shared. The website will also be, or the intranet, sorry, will be updated with the information on it. Also, with regards to when I come out of a meeting, I also, when I go back and meet with unions and with staff, I would also mention that it has been agreed at the personnel board. So again, any opportunity we've got, I will make sure that, as you say, just sending an email isn't the way just to do it. It needs to be something that is done verbally. But also what we're looking at doing more generally, and this would be part of that, is training for our managers, etc. So this becomes part of I suppose the documents that sit behind that management training as well.
That's great. So thank you very much. And, you know, I think that is a great step forward in ensuring that we are, you know, a fair, transparent employer, that any issues are dealt with as quickly and fairly as possible, and vitally in line with the ACAS code. So thank you very much to you and your team for developing that. Okay, so item 40 is an update on senior recruitment.
So, yep, I just wanted to give an update on the Place and Growth Director recruitment. I appreciate there's been quite a number of different dates that have been shared with you, and I just wanted to give a bit of explanation for why we've changed them. As you were made aware this week, our current interim of Place and Growth will be leaving at the end of January. And so to ensure that we have him involved with the technical elements of the first interview, we have sort of shortened the recruitment process, and hence that was the reason why we then looked at different dates to ensure that we had those in place. So currently, with regard to what is happening, there's technical first interviews happening on the 18th of January. Those are officer led. And from that, a report will be written, ready for the shortlisting meeting, which is set for the 23rd of January. An invite, I think, has gone out to those councillors about that. If they haven't, then please do advise, and we will make sure that's in your diary. And then finally, just with the other date that I just wanted, at the panel interview, we're looking at to be the 6th of February, and that would normally be in the day rather than in the evening. I'm now going to be quiet for a moment because I can see there's a number of questions.
Super. Pauline, were you first? Yes, I think you were.
Thanks. It was a diary question, actually. I don't know whether we can get some better coordination with Democratic Services, but Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny have tried to put a meeting in on top of the Personnel Board, which isn't very helpful. So they're moving meetings around without looking at the conflicts. So I've accepted the Personnel Board on the 23rd and have now got Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny, which is looking at the budget on the same time.
Thank you very much for raising that, and we will raise that with Democratic Services because we do want to avoid these clashes in meetings. I know it's very difficult, particularly in January. A lot of things which were maybe held over from December end up being scheduled at the same time. But we do want to make sure that if you're scheduled to appear at a meeting, that then you are able to do so.
My point is slightly different. That I'm not going to be involved in the Director of Place and Growth recruitment because it needs to be one of the people that deals with the Director of Place and Growth. So I'm not being involved in that, and it will either be Paul or Ian or Lindsay that replaces me. I'm not sure which one, but we'll sort that out. But they need to be invited, and I need to. In fact, one of the questions I had for tonight was I didn't need to come to the 23rd of January because I'm not going to be involved in that recruitment. But we need to make sure whoever is going to be involved does get that invite.
Ferris is going to replace me.
Fantastic, thank you.
I've asked Paul. Paul has agreed, but he hasn't checked his diary yet, and I don't think he's got all the meeting invites. I've told him about the 6th of February, but I didn't tell him about the 23rd of January.
Would you just? Sorry. I think Paul would be a good person to be included in that panel because he is the executive member for one of the largest components of that directorate.
That's great, thank you. And Louise, I guess you will be pulling that together.
Absolutely. I think, Madeline, you can probably confirm if that's actually happened.
I will invite Lindsay, and I have invited Paul already, and I believe he's already confirmed, but I will double check that for you.
Sorry, this Chair, can I just add one final point that I just wanted to raise? Due to the shortening of the process, it does mean that you won't get your agenda paper. So the shortlisting paper won't be the normal 5 days because it's the 18th and then the 23rd. But we're already starting to obviously make sure that's prepared. And as soon as it's the process is finished, we will get the papers to Democratic Services so we can then get them out to you. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody's flexibility because it is going to be very valuable, I think, to have Steve Moore involved in the early stages of the process and to bring his expertise to the start of the process. Do we have any further questions on that? No? Okay. In that case, I will move to item number 41, which is exclusion of the public, that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 and 2 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act as amended as appropriate.